Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and I have noticed an uptick in listeners from Singapore, which is amazing. So I thought I'd do a case from that location. And looking into the area, I found that, trying to find serial killers, really the country is only noted to have one true serial killer, and he was British. So I'm not going to do that. But this case kept popping up about curry. It sounds just bizarre, and so I looked into it. It is just as odd as it sounds, and I'm going to share what I've managed to find about it. Though I'm sure my accent and names are going to be difficult. I will do my best. I really do promise, but I have said it before. Names are hard, okay? In December 1984, 34-year-old Ayakanu Mariamuthu simply vanished in Singapore. Ayakanu was born in 1950 in India. He was married to a woman named Nagarathi Valley Ramia, or Ramia for short. The couple had 3 children together. Around 1980, the family immigrated from India to Singapore, moving into a small house behind the Orchard Road Presbyterian Church, and their extended family, including Rami's brothers and mother, all ended up relocating to Singapore in the Changi area as well. Ayakanu took a job as a caretaker of the Public Utilities Board run holiday chalets, while his wife worked at the church. Then, on January 9th, 1987, the police department in Changi, Singapore, received a call. Now, there are varying reports on how this went. First was that Detective G. Alagamali had an informant that told him that he had something he needed to share, something he had wanted to tell him for years, that Ayakanu was murdered in 1984, dismembered and cooked into curry, then served to others at the Orchard Road Presbyterian Church. That the informant reported that he was actually served the curry in January of 1985 and was certain that the tainted meat was that of Ayakanu himself. Another version of this was that the informant was at the bar when some men started boasting about murdering Ayakanu, butchering him, and turning him into curry. In either case, Detective G brought it back to the station and began to investigate. But remember, he's attempting to resolve this case years after Ayakanu went missing and would likely have difficulty collecting adequate evidence to support the informant's claims. The detective did indeed find a missing persons report filed in December of 1984 by Rami. She told police that Ayakanu was planning on borrowing money from his employer and going on a vacation to Genting Highlands in Malaysia, a place known for its casinos. But he never made it back home, let alone to his vacation. Still, with the wife's report, police appeared to have pretty much dismissed the case as a man who simply left his family rather than went missing. After the initial missing persons report, the family never contacted police for a follow-up, and it doesn't really look like there was much of an investigation into where he went. Detective G thought it strange, though, that Ayakanu would borrow money from his employer, let alone take it to a casino and gamble. Why? Well, he had actually just borrowed money, $600 in fact, in order to buy his children their school supplies. So he already owed his employer money, and it would be strange to ask for more. Additionally, Ayakanu never booked a vacation or left Singapore to travel. He also pre-requested time off for the holidays, in which he planned to be home with his family. Shortly after the initial call to police, Rami took her children and moved. About 3 months later, Rami took a job at the Fu Chao Methodist Church. Detective G was certainly behind the curve at this point. He decided that he needed to speak to all those who knew Ayakanu including neighbors, church staff, churchgoers, and coworkers. That's when he learned why there wasn't really much of a kerfuffle about Ayakanu's disappearance. You see, Ayakanu was an alcoholic who beat his wife almost daily. The neighbors heard the fights and reported to see the bruises on Rami. Even Rami's brothers had witnessed him beating her. At times, Rami would be beaten so badly that she would take the children and run to her brother's or mother's house. But every time she would return to Ayakanu. Since divorce really wasn't an option, Rami just seemed to put up with it. And divorce not being an option is multifactorial here. First, in Asian culture, it is looked down upon to divorce, often leading to a woman being ostracized, essentially. In addition, money was tight for the family, and Rami likely didn't feel like she had the means to just pick up her children and get away while being able to survive and take care of the family. Detective G then spoke with Rami, who stated she did file the missing persons report, but that she had simply never received any update or information on his case after that. Detective G looked into Rami's family, finding a brother, Balakrishna, who was a butcher and a mutton seller. This immediately made him a potential suspect. By March 23rd, Detective G added 3 more names to his list. 2 men and a woman who worked between 2 churches in the finance ministry holiday bungalows. That evening, special investigators conducted a raid at several locations and ended up arresting 8 people in total, including Rami, her 3 brothers, their wives, and Rami's mother. Rami's 2 brothers, Radhakrishna and Jamunga Chandra, also worked as caretakers with Ayakanu. After 2 days of interrogations, reportedly one of the brothers said that Ayakanu was indeed murdered on December 12th, 1984, in the Presbyterian Church's caretaker quarters. All 3 brothers had dragged Ayakanu into the church. Initially, it was part of an intervention for his drinking and treatment of their sister. But instead of listening, Ayakanu attempted to fight them. And so they fought back. They ended up holding Ayakanu down and beat him to death with an iron rod. After that, they had to decide what were they going to do next. In order to get rid of any evidence, Balakrishna deboned Ayakanu, and the family worked together to make batches of curry and biryani with Ayakanu's meat. The bones were crushed and placed in black trash bags and dispersed into different garbage bags throughout the neighborhood. While some of the curry was eventually just thrown out, part of it was actually brought to several churches in Changi. Police interviewed a sanitation worker that said that he had tried the curry, but it was so bad, he ended up spitting it out. After talking with churchgoers, many of them reported that they had bad curry in December 1984 and January 1985, which tended to lead some credence to this story. On March 27, 1987, the 3 brothers and Ramia were all charged with murder. Ramia's sister-in-law and mother were charged with abetting the crime. 3 months later, all 6 people were brought to court. 200 people showed up to watch the trial. But in the beginning, prosecution declared they didn't have enough evidence to continue with trial. The suspects were granted discharge, and the family was released. Discharge is not an acquittal. They're still eligible to be rearrested and tried for the crime if new information was to come to light. But without a body and no DNA evidence, there simply wasn't a solid case in order to ensure conviction of any of the family members in the 1987 trial. And remember, this was 1987, and it was years after the initial incident happened, and so DNA really wasn't a thing back then. The following day, the brothers were actually rearrested and given 4 years for criminal conduct, all of which were released on June 21st, 1991. As of the case, Central Investigation Department Director Xing stated, quote, This is one of the most unusual and bizarre cases we have ever handled. End quote. While this all sounds really wild, there are other theories that I figured I'd kind of touch on briefly. First, that Ayakanu was unhappy with his family and his life. He was, after all, a chronic alcoholic, and he was very abusive to his family. That he indeed did leave for Malaysia, as Ramia had stated, abandoning his family essentially. After all, they were living paycheck to paycheck, and like I had stated earlier, Ayakanu had to borrow money just to purchase some school supplies that were outside of their regular expenses. While it was noted that he didn't take any transport that could be tracked out of country, there are other means to travel that may not have been documented, but could potentially have been cheaper for Ayakanu to get where he wanted. The reason Ramia didn't push too hard on the missing person wasn't because of any crime on her part, but because she was abused by Ayakanu. So she did her duty as a wife, but the general consensus, and even from neighbors, was good riddance. As to the confession, please remember it came after 2 days of interrogation. How many times have we heard false confessions under duress? I cannot speak to the conditions of these interrogations because I simply don't know how it went down, if they got breaks, if they were allowed to sleep, if somebody was continually talking to them. But if they were relentless, it is proven that people will give false information in an attempt to get the interrogation to simply end. And the more someone is awake, the less that they are considered reliable as it is. In many places, like an example, Washington State, if you're awake for more than 24 hours in a row, police consider that similar to being drunk. So if you're driving, that is not legal, um, which is a fun fact because we used to have to pull 24-hour duties in the military and then drive home after. Anyway, the last is that bad curry was maybe just that. Maybe they just had some bad curry or bad batches of meat that ended up resulting in this curry. And so, it aligned with somebody maybe being drunk at a bar and just boasting about something that maybe really didn't even happen. But how many times do people get caught up in their own stories and then people mishear things, becomes a game of telephone, and maybe they said that they did something to him. Maybe that's why he ran away from his family, as the brothers, did have an intervention. Or maybe they did fight him, and so Yakunu was scared and left on his own. And the story got confabulated into this amazing story of him getting cut up and served as curry. But having someone cut up, cooked, and served to others is really a more fantastical story, and I could see how it would get more attention. Still, one thing remains true. Ayakanu is a missing person. It was reported by his wife, and he has never been found. To all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.